Sweet in the group.
Yep.
Anyone that is on here and watching, just let us know. Give us a thumbs up that this live is going all good. I know some of you, or most of you, probably at work anyway. Yeah, we're live. We're good. So,
Cool.
yeah. Where do you want to start off with gut health? Because it's a pretty broad topic.
It is.
But I don't know about you. The biggest issues that I see with gut health is, people eating too much refined foods. Like that's basically where it all stems from, in my
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah. It's definitely a factor. The ones that really mess with your head, though, is where you see the people that are doing everything really well and they still got the gut problems. Or you'll find people that have switched their diet and they're on a really healthy diet, and all of a sudden everything goes bad. And as you know, with the naturopath stuff, it's often, it's a healing crisis, or you'll get worse before you get better, or something like that. But a lot of that relates back to that gut health. So one of the things, man, that I've noticed is a massive pattern. A lot of people, when they talk about gut health, and I'll ask them, what do you mean when you say you got gut problems? And they'll talk about bloating, or abdominal distension, or like abnormal bowel habits, but it's usually like gas, bloating, fullness, gurgling and noises and all that sort of stuff. And then when I ask them, what have you done up until now to try to fix it? And they'll tell me about, changing to like restrictive diets, or using, probiotics, or, glutamine or something like that. So there's some really interesting patterns that I can let people in on. One of the biggest tips from a naturopath perspective is when you're getting that sort of bloating and distension, and when you get symptoms of what we call dysbiosis, in most cases it's an overgrowth. It's not a deficiency of microbes. So, and that's one of the most common problems that I see, is everyone believes that they have a deficiency. So they get these bloating problems, they get this distension, they get this gas. So they go rush out and buy probiotics and fermented foods and all that sort of stuff, and then it just keeps getting worse. And then they're convinced that it'll probably get worse before they get better. So they keep pushing on. And that's one of the errors that I see people make. So one of the main thing that I wanted to say there is that we're supposed to have our large intestine is supposed to be full of microbes. But up in the small intestine, it's not supposed to be anywhere near as dominated by microbes as the large intestine. So when these people are getting a lot of this bloating and that sort of stuff, it's an indication that the microbes have actually overgrown from the large intestine and now starting to overtake the small intestine. And then what happens is they're getting fed food before it's properly digested, and then they ferment that food, and that makes the gas and bloating and dysbiosis. The simple process of having that fullness, the distension and the bloating is pretty much a good indication you've got an overgrowth of bugs, not a deficiency.
Yeah.
And
I've had that before, and it came up a few times, especially in the bodybuilding, times, was that small intestine, or SIBO. So, and I noticed it just feels like real, bloaty. And then another thing that I noticed was like a lot of it, I just felt acidic as well. What's the reasons for that?
Well, so basically what happens is, and especially really common in bodybuilding, like as one of the most favorite sayings, anyone that talks about gut bugs, is like, we got 10 times as many gut bugs in our guts as we have whole cells of our whole body. So you got to realize that when you're preparing, or when you're going through a bulking phase, or you're preparing for your before photo or something like that in an obesity challenge, you're actually building a lot of cells. And the way you do that is by feeding up yourself. And you got to realize, for every cells that you're building through your body, you're building 10 times as many of those microbes in your gut. And the big problem that we have from that is basically every time you eat, you're feeding bugs. And if you're consistent with your foods, like dedicated and consistent and, committed to a process, then often you feed the wrong foods, or the same foods over and over again for long enough that you'll actually overfeed certain bugs. Now, in nature, this goes back to your point before about refined foods.
Yeah.
In nature, wherever we find carbs and high energy foods, we also find a heap of poisons that actually stop the microbes from feeding on the extra sugar. Because when these foods are in the wild, growing on a tree or in a swamp or whatever, if they're rice paddies and that sort of stuff, there's microbes and mold and fungi and stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
And they all trying to get to the sugar that's in the inside of the fruit and the seeds and that. So on the skins and the peels and the rinds, they've all got these polyphenols that are full of poisons that kill off the microbes. So in nature, if we were to eat a lot of unprocessed foods, every time we're getting the carbs, we're also getting a heap of poison. So every time we're feeding the bugs, we're also releasing some poisons or supplying some poisons with it that will stop them from overgrowing. And so what happens when we eat a lot of refined foods, we're getting the calories that they love, they're getting the fuel, but they're not getting any of the polyphenols, modbiotic sort of compounds, the polysaccharides and these sort of things. A lot of people think they're bad. A lot of people will look at these compounds and say, oh, because they're toxic or they're antimicrobial, they're going to cause gut problems. But if you once you get your head around the fact that most gut problems are associated with an overgrowth, not a deficiency, then you can start to understand where antimicrobial and antibacterial and antiparasitic and these compounds, these poisons that are found in plants are actually good for us because they're stopping the overgrowth of the bugs. So, yeah, and what you'll see is, and when I'm talking about healthy people, you might eat a balanced diet, but you're not eating a varied diet. We might find chicken, broccoli, rice coming through every few hours for a period of time. Chickily, yeah. And then that basically can feed up specific strains, and then other strains miss out. And that's where the importance of the unprocessed or raw. But even so, man, like you go real healthy, you could be eating like seedless grapes and all that sort of stuff, and you could be eating like everything's changing, So we've actually got they talk about how much vitamins and minerals are gone from our food, and they also talk about how much fiber has gone from our food. Very few people understand that the vitamins, the minerals, and the fiber is the exact same location that we find all the polyphenols. But the big problem with polyphenols is they taste bad and they're astringent. They make your mouth go all, tanniny and all that sort of stuff. So that's why they're removed.
Supposed to, but aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And that also stops us from overeating the bloody things. It's a very important part of dosing of natural medicine is how much can you chew, how much can you tolerate, because we have a mouth and a throat, that actually can, and we got to chew these things. They've got texture, they got taste, they got flavor. And that in itself can actually help to monitor our dose so we're not overdosing on the poisons. And that's where intuition and that sort of stuff is so powerful when it comes with our foods. But if we're basically eating refined foods, then we're feeding them all the sugar. And if you've got an overgrowth of bugs, it's just like throwing fertilizer down there. They're just loving it. They're thriving and they'll get it first.
Worse.
Yeah. And that's what prebiotics are. I mean, a lot of prebiotic supplements and that sort of stuff are just sugars that bugs like to feed on.
Yeah, well, that was a wild thing that I learned off of you. Like when I was having those gut issues, because I was someone that would listen to you and then go and implement it myself because I love testing things.
Yeah.
You suggested this polyphenol stuff to me, whereas my whole headspace was about, I just need to put in a probiotic and my gut will be all right. But it wasn't changing. I was actually getting more bloated. And when you suggested the polyphenols, and then I went on to a low carb diet as well. I went more of a backloading. So I was having polyphenols when I was in more of a fasted state, and then would have basically keto through the day and only have carbs at night.
Perfect.
I found that helped me out within 14 days. My gut was way down and I could see my abs properly. It was amazing.
Yeah. And if you consider, so there's some good little tips too. So to know if you've got an overgrowth of bugs, one of the things that makes it worse is digestive enzymes. So if you ever get bloating, if you've got enzyme deficiency and you've got bloating because you've got no pancreatic enzymes and your food's fermenting, you'll get bloating. But then if you've got an overgrowth of bacteria, when you use pancreatic enzymes, it liberates the sugar sooner and allows the bugs in the small intestine to ferment it faster. So if you get extra bloating from digestive enzymes, it's a good tip that you're actually got an overgrowth of bugs. But I tell you what's a massive impact is rebound weight gain. And so you got to realize that these bugs are designed to help you grow and that sort of stuff. They want to keep you where you are. And so you go into a cutting phase, you cut out your carbs and that sort of stuff. These little bugs want to increase your calorie yield. They want to keep you and maintain your size. They're actually trying to protect you, and they stop you from losing weight if you've got an overgrowth. And then you can even look at the fact that in amongst our bugs, 80% of our gut flora is made up of 2 strains, which is our Bacteroidetes and our Firmicutes. And the Firmicutes increase your calorie yield by about 20%. So you got an overgrowth of those. If you can't kill them off, then as you're trying to diet, it just screws around with the math. It's really hard to work out the calorie in and calorie out. Plus the little buggers. We know how much effect the microbes can have on your brain function. We talk about it all the time in learning behavior and insomnias and depressions and stuff like that, but absolutely have a massive effect when it comes to cravings. And what you're craving is exactly what they want. And this is where the polyphenols are the best trick.
But before we go any further, we've got a question here. What are some examples of polyphenols? Because you and I both know what they are straight up, but let's let them know.
There are so many. Okay, so we've got the so in the green teas and that sort of stuff, we've got all these catechins like EGCG, which is catechin gallate or some shit. So EGCG, things like resveratrol is one. Schisandrins. Yeah, so a lot of people know resveratrol. It's the main polyphenol that's found in wine and whiskies and that sort of stuff. It comes out of the skins and the pulp from grapes and grape pomace and everything like that. It's probably one of the more famous ones. There's other polyphenols that come out of oak barrels and that sort of stuff, which is why things that traditionally fermented in oak have a lot of that. But you'll also find that there's a lot of polyphenols. There's a whole group of these things, polyphenols, polysaccharides, flavonoids, bioflavonoids. They kind of all overlap into their food sources, but you'll find them all in the skins and the peels and the rinds. But, we're looking at things like quercetins, we're looking at luteolin, and there's so many different little compounds for it, apigenins, and, I could just keep listing them. But basically you'll find in the peels and the skins and in seeds, and like the skins off nuts and the skins off fruit and all that sort of stuff, that's where you're going to be finding most of your polyphenols, a big variety of them. And you'll find them on the outside of the plants because that's where they're protecting the microbes from invading to the inside of the plants where we find the sugars.
Yep, defense mechanism. That's nature. And that's where it all comes back to. And when that's the argument that I've heard quite a lot is like, oh, don't eat fruit because it's got fructose in it, like if it's like this big evil. But it's like, bro, what about the polyphenols? What about the fiber that's actually going to slow down the release of glucose into your bloodstream? What about all those variables? It's like having a straight rice that's a refined rice from Woolworths is not the same as having fruit because you've got minerals, you've got vitamins, even though they're less than what they used to be. You've still got your fiber in there and the polyphenols, which is going to help your gut microbiome.
Yeah, well, it's so crazy because we look a lot. Calories in and calories out is basically going to determine your body composition. But how to determine the calories in and calories out is multifactorial because we got, like we just said before, a straight imbalance between the strains and microbes can change your calorie yield by 20%. Having your fiber converted into a resistant starch can actually bind. Things like resistant starch, for example, they cook, when you cook rice with oil and use an absorption method, the rice has got starch in it, but there's not much oil. But when you cook it with oil, then you get this oil and starch floating around. You eat it fresh, you get all the calories from it. When you let it sit for 12 hours, the oil mixes with the starch and it actually makes a thing called resistant starch. And you can't absorb the resistant starch, and it can actually halve the calories you get from carbs by 50%. And so that changes your mass. And then we're going through going, oh, well, we might have anti-nutrients in our high plant-based diet. Like we could have things like soy and pea can actually inhibit protein absorption. So that screws around with your math. And then we're looking at modifying your calories out through exercise. And then if we also look at the fact that as we exercise, your microbiome changes to modify what your calorie burn should be. So there's just so many factors. Oh, what I was going to say before with those losing the fibers and our body gets these cravings, polyphenols and polysaccharides that kill the bugs, they're kind of like sugar molecules. So they come through looking a bit like sugars. So while these bugs are starving for the sugars, they actually suck the poisons in, and that helps to kill them off. And so that's one of the best tricks, when the people are getting the cravings between the meals, if you acknowledge the fact that it's actually the microbes fighting. I keep moving because I'm falling down this hill. I thought I found a sand dune. I find a nice sand dune to sit on, and I realised
Avalanche.
I know. But yeah. And I got some pig's face here too, by the way. Here's some more other polyphenols that you get wild growing on the beach. That stuff's amazing. You boil it up, it tastes like salty beans. And eat the purple flowers, tastes like tamarilla. But they're all full of polyphenols.
We've got another question that's come in. Like, are polyphenols as abundant in GMO food?
Well, we don't really know. They could be if they chose to modify the genes to enhance it or express it. Unfortunately, most of the GMO foods are reducing polyphenols to reduce the astringency, reduce the tannins, get rid of the seeds, and make sure there's lots of nice sweet juice and less pulp. Like you've seen how things have changed over the years, especially just looking at things like grapes and that. They used to be the grape seeds and the thick skins and that sort of stuff compared to these tiny, thin skin, seedless grapes we get now that are basically glucose lollies,
Yeah, little lollies.
Yeah, but genetically modified through natural selection or through manipulation could be utilized to increase the polyphenols in the food. And I tell you what would be the benefit of that for the agricultural industry, if anyone wants to listen and tell them, but they don't have to use as much bloody pesticides and everything like that if they got natural polyphenols, and if they actually look after the ecobiome, which is the right kind of microbes that are living in the soil, so they're not actually predisposed to these horrible fungal infections they have to use horrible chemicals for, I just fell down the hill again.
Bloody oath. Well, anyone who, I know there's only a few of you guys on here live today, but anyone that is watching the replay, if you guys have any questions about any of this, feel free to drop it in there, because next week we're going to roll on with this, because the most popular topics that you guys have voted for is gut health. And then it's funny because that ties into the next popular subject, which was hormones and estrobolome, right?
Yep.
So let's have a bit of a conversation about how the gut and the microbiome, because we're going in the direction of our brain as well. And that kind of ties into our hormones, because I know for a fact that your gut produces a lot of those hormones, but I'll let you put that together anyway.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll do a full one on the estrobolome, but I'll tell you something else too, another one with gut health problems. In the clinic, or anyone out there that tries to eat healthy, like when you try to eat healthy, sometimes you switch over to like the sweet potatoes and you'll eat a lot more spinaches and kales, or you try to get all these things in, and then all of a sudden everything goes to hell. So not many people realize this, but our microbiome, it also regulates our absorption of things like uric acid, that can contribute to gout, joint pain, fluid retention, bloating, high blood pressure, and that sort of stuff. Oxalates, that can be nerve irritants. Both of those things contribute to kidney stones and that sort of stuff, but they also trigger irritation in your nerves. They all come out of our really good, healthy foods. And so sometimes what happens, we have an overgrowth of microbes that actually start generating these compounds themselves, these waste metabolites, or they inhibit the ability for our other good microbes to clear it away. And the end result is these people switch over to go to a nice healthy diet to fix their guts, or they got this gut problem and the doctor will say, just eat a bland diet for a while or something like that. And they go, bland diet, that must just be things like bread and rice or something, which are just complex carbs. And they all get worse. And so many of these gut problems, so many of the problems when people are going through a healing crisis or they try to get healthy, man, you know what we should do? A whole series of when bad guts hijack good foods. Because
actually, everyone who's watching this, if you guys want like a series, we can do that as guides in the group. So we can do that as a full series of like step by steps.
Because we can do oxalate one, we can do a uric acid, so we can show where kidney stones, oxalates, nerve irritation, anxiety comes from with there. Uric acid that associated with gout and fluid retention. We can show you all that pathway. We can show that if you have the wrong microbes when you eat carbs, how they can go bad. But if you've got a different microbiome and eat those carbs, it goes good. Oh, we've got the whole methylamine pathway, where if you've got an overgrowth of the Clostridia, they'll actually hijack your carnitine, which is used in supplements to make you burn fat, and they'll turn carnitine into atherosclerotic plaques. Or they'll hijack the choline out of your nuts and eggs and turn it into cholesterol plaques and stuff as well, all from the wrong gut bugs. And we kill all them off. You can fix all those things, and then you eat the same food that you reacted to, and all of a sudden you don't have that problem anymore. Which then goes into intolerances, which we can talk a lot more about as well. And each one of these have specific strategies, which is why we should do in-depth ones on each one of them.
Yeah. Well, I think that's going to be the best route. And we've got another question coming that are just like, so what food do you suggest we actually eat? So I reckon if we wrap that back around to, you know, in my experience, obviously in the naturopathic clinic, everyone's an individual and we adapt it to that individual. But the approach that worked best for me was, you know, polyphenols in supplement form, with a keto diet throughout the day. And then when I was having my carbs at night, it was a lot more vegetables, and I did have a little bit of rice. It could have been a bit more optimal possibly without that rice.
Yep.
But I needed it because I was bodybuilding then and I wanted to look jacked.
Yeah. The funny thing is, I'll tell you another little tip. In my clinic, when I didn't know what to do, like when the people had all these, I didn't know if it was IBS or IBD or UC or CD or whatever bloody combination of letters they might have had. They had a whole alphabet soup in there sometimes.
All the ibises.
Yeah, all the ibises. What I used to do is I used to do this basic cheating thing where I'd take out all complex carbs for a short period of time. Because if you realize that most of these microbes are living in the large intestine, and they're the ones that we're trying to stop the overgrowth from, and that it's only the really complex sugar molecules that get there. And what spun me out is the people with really bad guts, they're telling me that they could live on junk food, no problem. Their guts are good. They have lollies or stuff like that, jelly beans, no problem. And that sort of stuff. But if they had a nice bowl of steamed rice, oh, their guts are bad and stuff, you know? And so I used to do this thing called like a specific carbohydrate diet, where basically it's eating simpler sugars and avoiding the really complex sugars just for a short period of time to starve off the gut bugs. While you're starving them, they're craving the carbs, the complex carbs, and that's when the polyphenols come into play, because they suck them in instead. They get confused and think that they're source of food for them, and that kills them off while they're starving. Where while they're really full and well fed, they don't suck in as much poison. So you got to be a bit strategic. But I used to follow. There was this old book. This old nurse wrote it, Elaine Gottschall, I remember, and the book was called Breaking the Vicious Cycle. And it was this old nurse from intensive care units that realized that in hospitals, when people go really, really bad, they put them in and they put them on a drip, like feed them down through a tube, and they basically feed them only glucose. Wow. And it'll be horrible stuff like canola oil and but basic crap like canola oil, whey protein, and glucose. And when they drip that in, their guts settle down. And fiber, and it's just like, this is bullshit. It's not healthy. The main thing that was showing up in that is that if you just took away the complex carbs and substitute glucose, there's less for them to ferment, and it can help to break the cycle. Definitely not a solution. But I tell you what, if all else goes pear-shaped, you go back to meat, fruit, veg, nuts, seeds, eggs, cheese, and then all of a sudden, a lot of those complex carbs, the cereals and grains are gone, and everything settles down. Then you can go in and do some cool stuff. And like before, like you're saying, taking probiotics when you've got an overgrowth. I mean, if you have a look at your lawn, imagine if your lawn's full of weeds and you go up to a pile of weeds, you're just throwing grass seeds at it. It's not going to make the weed get up and leave. Like if you've got an overgrowth, or if you've got a candida overgrowth, these things protected by biofilm. I mean, your probiotic little pathetic little spores sitting inside a capsule are not going to push it out of the way. And neither is a prebiotic sugar that is actually going to feed it. That's why you got to go in sometimes with some poison and make some space. And then if you know which strains of bugs you actually want to put in, you can specifically fill up the gaps with the ones you want.
Let's get into that, because that's some stuff that I love talking about. Let's talk about the different types of bugs and how we can utilize them, whether it's for brain function, feeling good, relaxed, off switches, fat loss, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, endurance.
Endurance.
Brain function, performance, pain relief. Oh, man, you got no idea. And then what we're going to do is start talking about the postbiotic stuff, which is actually the miraculous stuff that these little buggers make that do all the actual work. And then we'll see if we can find a way to bypass the confusion and get you the postbiotic effects guaranteed. You know, that'll be the sweet spot.
Bloody yeah. Oh, killer. And I reckon that with these lives, and what do you reckon? We're going to turn this into a podcast anyway, but we'll do these lives every single week. But I just want to know from everyone that is watching or does watch the replay, what's going to be the most helpful thing for you guys? Because it's all well and good to consume information, but it doesn't matter whatsoever if you just consume something and then don't take action. Is it going to be helpful for you guys if we make you up some cheat sheets for each of these lives as well? Then we can just drop them into the group and send them out to those that are interested in that specific issue. And that way we can do that series sort of model and just go right deep into the gut health, because we can do overviews on all of these, symptoms all of the time. But if you have a specific issue that you're like, oh, that's actually really calling to me, then we'll chuck that into the group, and then you'll have that sort of, we're getting yes pleases already.
Yeah, sweet. Because we're not, and this is what I encourage everyone to do, because this is what I always used to do with my old podcast when I had the other crew around. I'd ask them to be thinking in the back of the mind as I'm speaking, so what? Not to be an arsehole or anything, but like, so what do I do tomorrow? Or so what do I do now? Or so what do I eat? So what do I take? So what do I avoid? So that sort of stuff. So we're going to try to answer all your so what's rather than just talking conceptually. And that's the benefit of having it in a group, is that we can actually go through and provide some specific information that is not necessarily perceived as misleading marketing material. Just help you provide you with some proper information that you can utilize.
Yeah, epic. Yeah. So we're getting someone that's saying, sounds like it could help. Can we dumb it down a bit though? Absolutely. Like, we'll that's what it's about. I'll make the downloads so that they've got like pictures and stuff. I like making things look like playbooks, kids' playbooks, pictures, all the cool stuff. It's like, eat this, and they're your polyphenol foods that you want to focus on, that sort of stuff. So we will make it what I call silly proof.
Yeah, and that's really important, because that's how it's bloody useful. And when you first learn this stuff, doesn't matter where it is. I mean, I went and did a tour at Microba, which is an interesting place with just different level when it talks to testing. And they had to bring out the whole sock puppets and crayons for me, and just sitting there explaining it all, because I just didn't understand their job. So it's like that. And it's the same as when I go to the mechanic, man. I got no idea. And so we definitely need to be able to do it. And if we understand it well enough, we should be able to explain it well enough for others to understand as well.
Bloody. So we've got another one coming here. We've got a couple questions going through. So I think we'll just leave the rest of this. If any of you guys that are on live have questions, drop them in the chat. So we've got Keen, how to fight the complex carb cravings when it's intense after the polyphenols, etc. Is there any protocols here for that?
Not so much. It's more of a mental aspect in that aspect. I mean, there's definitely things you can do for cravings, and I can list them off. But once you understand that it's the microbes that are actually dying off, you have an overgrowth of microbes, and they are dying off, and they are telling you to feed them. It's pretty hard to avoid that, other than the fact that you just got to poison the buggers. So it's more of that mental game of going, I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to trick me into feeding them. I'm going to throw the poisons down first. And if you do break, if you do crack, if you do need the snacks and you do crave the thing, make sure you throw down a mega dose of the polyphenols with it. So if you are going to ever cheat, if you're going to binge, you're going to do that sort of stuff, just smash down a whole heap of antimicrobial herbs and that sort of stuff with it. And the antimicrobial herbs that I love, things like pomegranate, yerba mate is a really good one for cravings, by the way. So yerba mate.
Yerba mate tea, I love it.
Yeah. And you can see, have you seen the cool little yerba mate pipe tea, that pipe looking things? So traditionally the way they do it in South America is they get this little pot and they fill it up, like it almost looks like a pipe, like the end of a pipe. They fill it up with all the yerba mate and they add some boiled water and they mash it. And they got like a metal straw with holes in it. and they just sit there and mash it around, and they just hold this pipe with this metal straw and suck the juice out. So it's really concentrated, and they suck it. It's like it looks like a pipe. It's really cool. Yeah, I'm getting one too.
Yeah. We'll have to have a yerba mate tea session and do that on one of the lives.
The funny thing is there's a GLP-1 is a peptide that's released. It basically tells your body that you've had adequate calories and you don't need to eat. And it also helps to stop the rebound, slow down on metabolism. If you've got too low calories, normally thyroid slows down. Well, it actually helps to prevent that. So yerba mate is one of my favorite things that you can be doing to prevent the cravings. It does have the caffeine in it. And the problem is a lot of people that I found have their cravings at night. Oh man, they're one of the greatest tricks ever. I tell you, there's another herb called Gymnema sylvestri or Gymnema sylvester. I don't know how to say it.
About that before.
Well, it numbs the sweet taste buds of your tongue. So if you can get it as a liquid, you get the liquid fluid extract and you put some drops on your tongue. Then if you eat sugars, it tastes terrible. Like it just tastes like chemicals, or it tastes like.
That's a cool hack.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very good one as well for monitoring, helping with blood sugar and improving insulin sensitivity.
So if any of the women out there that want to get their hubby, like hack his food a little bit with his nighttime dessert, sprinkle a bit of that on the dinner.
Yeah. Oh man, I discovered that when I had a lady that was just diagnosed with diabetes, and she owned a lolly shop. And she just came in like in a panic, just like, I am screwed. I'm about to go blind and lose my feet. I cannot stop. And so we got her the Gymnema. Yeah. And that's when I made that prototype cream too, for that same person to fix the diabetic foot ulcers with a vasodilator thing. But, and one of the key factors in that was a thing called 20-hydroxyecdysterone. And that increased glucose disposal by like 30%, dumped the sugar into the cells. Really good. But yeah, so back to the cravings. Pomegranate, Schisandra, yerba mate are some of my favorites. And then we're looking at other really weird stuff like berberine is a very clever one. You take berberine in the mornings with meals and you won't get cravings at night.
Segue into the next question.
Oh, yeah?
So next question, any experience with PCOS lads? So that one's actually come in from YouTube. So berberine, perfect segue. Oh, you've gone mute there, Matt. Here we go with the tech. Still can't hear. Is your headphones plugged in fully? And luckily Brooke's not watching. Cool. No, still can't hear. I wonder what's going on there. All right. Weird. I can start. Can you hear me, Matt? Just give us a thumbs up if you can hear me still. Right. We've gone back to that. So I'll start talking about PCOS.
Oh, hey, gotcha. Sorry, man.
I was just
Someone was just ringing me. I don't know how to change it. Oh, well, you nailed it before anyway, because you already told him the diet.
Yeah.
So that diet that you were doing, come and comp, that's what we do with the PCOS. Because the key with PCOS is to improve the insulin sensitivity is one aspect of it. But the key is to improve insulin sensitivity is to deplete the glycogen. Mm-hmm. And so when you're glycogen deficient in your muscles, so meaning the stored sugar in your muscles, you burn that stuff out. And once it's gone, your body's craving more sugar to replace it. And throughout the day, the whole time you're depleted, you stay insulin sensitive. And then if you backload at night and have a nice deep sleep, because you're not going to be eating all night anyway, so it doesn't matter about that insulin's ups and downs, and you go and have a really nice deep sleep at night after your big carb load, you wake up full of glycogen, fasted exercise in the morning, and then relatively low carb, keto style eating all day, and all your carbs, your high energy carbs at night. And that's one of the most important dietary things. And then that also means exercising to deplete glycogen is an important factor. Yeah. And berberine is one of my most favorite herbs for PCOS.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was my protocol, because I had a period there. I didn't have a period, but a lot of the
So
women.
you fixed your PCOS then?
Yeah, fixed it. So yeah, a lot of women were coming to me like with post-comp issues, like because it was like a serious issue with the bikini competitors and whatnot. They blow out post-comp and then just couldn't lose the weight again. PCOS was a very, common occurrence in that space. So that was literally the protocol I did was, modified keto, like a little bit of carbs at night, backloading, and then literally chucked in berberine as a supplement. And it was just dose dependent on that person's weight. And that sorted it out as long as they stuck to that plan and did some exercise, as you said, to deplete that glycogen so that they're insulin sensitive. So that's the main thing is insulin sensitivity. And then just, that berberine really helps out, especially with the blood glucose effects on that stuff too. Like I went deep on the reading the white papers on that stuff back then.
Yeah. And you would see that one of the big factors with it is it lowers, when you got the insulin disorder, it lowers the sex hormone binding globulin, which deactivates the testosterone. And so one of the benefits of berberine is not only does it fix the blood sugar control, it also helps to break down biofilm and eradicate things like candida and that sort of bugs, clostridia that are associated with the insulin resistant profile. But it also increases the sex hormone binding globulin, which deactivates the buildup of testosterone. I tell you another trick that I do in my clinic is another herb that not many people use for PCOS, I don't think, because mainly it's sold as for men over 40. But I do. I always tell them to get products with saw palmetto, zinc, and selenium, because they need to stop the conversion through 5-alpha reductase that converts testosterone to dihydrotestosterone, because it's dihydrotestosterone that actually causes the cyst, the acne, the dark hair, and the pot belly, not the testosterone. So if you can block the conversion from testosterone to dihydro, and now normally that's associated with prostate cancer. So they say, oh, it's for men's waterworks over 40 or something. So I go and tell these people to get it. They come back, oh, I think you've made a mistake. It's for men over 40. It's like, no, it's for you too. So that's another
the bearded
one.
Ladies, hey.
Yeah. Oh, mate, it works beautifully. And acne, so saw palmetto I give to acne, PCOS. And I tell you the other thing that I prescribe in PCOS that I don't prescribe in anything else, and that's DIM, diindole methane. A lot of people believe, man, a lot of people, it's always sold as an anti-estrogen, but there's no evidence that it does anti-estrogen at all. But there is so much evidence that show that it blocks testosterone. And we always used it in the naturopath clinic. Before they started selling it as an anti-estrogen to bodybuilders, it was always sold for PCOS to block testosterone and sold in prostate cancer to block testosterone effects. So it's a very powerful anti-androgen, and it's a mild phytoestrogen. So it actually has an estrogenic effect and blocks the testosterone. And not many people know that. They all use it for this other bloody thing, which is not right, you know?
I remember back in the day when DIM was all the rave. It was like DIM and vitamin D3, like load up on them and you'll be, you'll block all of the estrogen and you'll get jacked as a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
And that was the
weird, hey? But it's not even based on anything. I mean, what it's based on is that they did these studies on indole 3 carbinol. Well, go back a step. They did the studies on the brassicas, the broccoli sprouts and all that sort of stuff to find out why the cruciferous vegetables were so protective against estrogen problems. Then they discovered that it has the sulfurous gas that comes off it is created by a thing called indole 3 carbinol. And as the body is exposed to indole 3 carbinol, it's a kind of like a sulfur-based poison that alters the way the liver works. So it upregulates certain pathways to deal with certain natural poisons. And then by upregulating that pathway, it drags the estrogen through that pathway. But then after that, it's converted to diindole methane, which is DIM.
Yeah.
And then they go through and go, well, we use DIM to do the same thing as indole 3 carbinol does because it's more stable. But it's not indole 3 carbinol. It's the breakdown product of indole 3 carbinol, which is why it's more stable. It's got nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
But it was indole 3 carbinol, and they still sell DIM based on references where they studied indole 3 carbinol. And then with the assumption that it'll do the same thing, and no one's ever confirmed that it does that. And it's quite annoying. And that's
a lot of studies.
Yeah, I know, because they just jump it across and go, here's a more stable. Well, folic acid was the classic. They did it. Yeah. They started it with all the B vitamins because, and this is again important for women because folic acid in its active form, which is not folic acid, it's like the 5-MTHF, the methylene tetrahydrofolate, that little sucker, that's the active form that's found in nature. Once you boil your food and you destroy it, it actually turns up in the water as folic acid. So that's why they always did the studies on folic acid. And then they said folic acid does the same thing as that's the active form, but it's not. It's not even found in nature unless it's boiled, or broken down. And so then, the 5-MTHF is the one we want. Now they're finding that we're looking at 1 in 4 women may have a conversion problem converting folic acid back to 5-MTHF, but it's too late. We've filled their foods up with bloody folic acid everywhere,
and, And for those of you that are listening, like, always remember that gene, because you told me it's the motherfucker gene.
Yeah, which is MTHFR, so it's methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase. And it sounds looks like motherfucker. Yeah, and it is a motherfucker when you consider that it can increase your risk of anxiety, depression, insomnia, estrogen dominance, or endometriosis, or premenstrual tension, migraine headaches. Sounds like a motherfucker
to me. And we've got another question coming in. So, does berberine have to be taken with food?
Yeah, I find so. So what berberine does, if you're doing it when you're fasting and you got low blood sugar, it actually works a lot like metformin in it inhibits the release of glycogen from the liver. So if you go into a low blood sugar, normally your liver would release a bit of glycogen to top that up so you don't get really spewy and sick. So it's just important to have it with meals if you're predisposed to getting low blood sugar. But in saying that, there's also the school of thought that if it does inhibit the release of sugar from the liver, you're more likely to tap into some of your fat supplies when you get low blood sugar. It's more just being aware that if you have it, it's definitely going to have a hypoglycemic effect in the sense that you might feel a bit queasy if you have it on an empty stomach and that sort of stuff. Plus, it does do a fair bit of die-off. It kills these bugs and it breaks down the biofilm, so you can get a little bit of a Herxheimer action. And I don't know if anyone's ever tasted berberine. Oh, it's so horrible. It's like bile. And it sticks to your tongue like shit to a blanket. It's horrendous. You can't get rid of it. And so basically, this bright yellow bile, horrible stuff definitely also gets the liver and gallbladder flowing. And so when you have it as well, you can get it can upset your tummy a little bit if you have it away from meals.
Yeah.
But all of those functions are kind of cool. If you can tolerate it, doesn't matter so much. It's not bad. It's just something that might make you feel a bit yuck,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we've got someone in here saying that they bros a textbook. So we're going to do mini textbooks for specific things. So keep an eye out for the Facebook group for that, which is at this link if those of you are watching on YouTube or anywhere else. And then come back to the chat. What else have we got in here? You guys are amazing. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. You're amazing. Thank you for watching us and listening to us talk trash.
Giving us an excuse to talk. Otherwise it'd be a bit weird, sitting around like idiots talking to each other.
I wish I had the athletic motherfucker gene and not the stupid, boring other one. Is what someone else has dropped in here?
And that's a very interesting point, because the athletic motherfucker gene, that one actually increases your strength by about 10%. And the motherfucker gene polymorphism's not all bad if you're a cave person. That's what it was designed for, because while feast and famine, you preserve your estrogen, while in a fatigue mode, it preserves your catecholamines in your brain, so it keeps you stressed and anxious and alert. All great for survival when we're starving and that sort of stuff, which is why it exists, and it's also why it's so damn common, because a couple of generations ago, they're the people that were the toughest, the strongest, the most fertile, and the fittest.
Yeah.
And now we're in today's society where they put folic acid in everything and they're struggling with it,
Fully. And then okay, so bad gut health leading to fatigue, how to counteract that. So literally, if you're listening to this live or the replay, from my perspective, absolutely you're going to get fatigue from bad gut health, because that's where we derive all of our energy from in the form of calories, which we convert into ATP. So that's going to be energy production. So if your digestion sucks, you're getting bloated and all those types of symptomatic stuff, focus on, getting these polyphenols in, following a diet that's going to help out sorting out your gut bugs, and then you should be right after that. That's where it comes back.
Oh, so much, man. Like B12. We don't
Yeah.
get B12 out of our food. You make it from your microbes. If you don't have the right microbes, you can't make B12. And do you know what happens if you can't make B12 from your microbes? It actually eats the villi off your gut lining, which is full of B12,
wow.
to liberate it into your body to make some blood.
And
Which
just
is
for
kind of cool.
those that don't know what villi are, like this is the way that I always used to explain it. It looked like little fingers on the inside of your intestines like that. So the smaller they get, the less surface area your food has to go down to actually be absorbed through your intestinal tract to go into your blood. So the more that goes down, like the less surface area you got. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why they talk about the gut wall having a surface area of 400 square meters, but the skin's only 2. It's because they're mainly counting off all the villi that increases the surface area so much. Other things that are made from your gut, we make a lot of B vitamins out of our gut as well. In fact, our B vitamins in our gut that our bugs need is made from tryptophan. So if you're deficient in B vitamins, or your diet is deficient in B vitamins, that's one of the main reasons why you'll get what the thing called the tryptophan steal, where it takes tryptophan away from serotonin, which contributes to anxiety, depression, and insomnia, and utilizes the tryptophan to make B vitamins. And that's a big contributes to fatigue, but you get that real wired but tired. You don't have enough serotonin to sleep, but you're too bloody tired all the time. So that's another common cause of a imbalance in your gut flora that contributes to fatigue. The other one is that it's just a constant source of inflammation and oxidative stress to your body otherwise.
Yeah, fully. All right, cool. Next question. We'll begin to start wrapping this up a little bit because we've been going for almost an hour. Those of you who do...
The sun's come out too.
Yeah, and getting a tan on. So Thorn Berberine is a decent brand. Nutritionists recommend to in the morning. So from my experience, Thorn has been a pretty decent brand, but I'm not going to suggest something that I don't
Thorn's
know.
good.
Yeah,
I like Thorn. They're great. Zymogen's exactly the same material. Same here. FX Med, I got something going on there with Thorn. But I like Thorn. I think from memory, normally the berberine you get in around 250 milligram capsules I usually get, and then I just work from there. So I get 250 milligrams, and you'll have that. I usually have one of those twice a day to start with. With meals, and otherwise I can jack it up to where people can do about 500 milligrams at once, and they can do that twice a day with their meals. But I usually start off a little bit slow and then build it up just in case they get like really low blood sugar as well as die-offs and they just feel terrible. So,
bloody oath.
I like berberine.
Well, we covered a shitload of ground on the gut health there, and I know that that's only really just touching the surface of it on how deep we can go. But for those of you who are watching that do want, some golden nuggets out of this and just let's call it a gut guide, I'm more than happy to make up
I was hoping you were going to say a gut golden nugget, man. I was thinking,
that's a great, the gut golden nugget guide.
I just imagine a little golden kangaroo poo.
Yeah. So any of you guys that are watching now or on the replay, whatever, just comment on this, and then I'll send you over that once I'll put it together.
Sounds cool.
Anything else that you want to, sprinkle on top to finish this off?
No, man, there's too much. My little sprinkles will be another hour. But I definitely think what we'll do is we'll start off with a simple protocol, because what I have noticed is when I go and get people to do organic acid tests, microba test, comprehensive stool analysis, initially most of these tests come back with some overgrowth and it's just too much white noise. And the initial protocols don't often change. So what we can do for people is provide a basic starting guide of what to eat and what supplements to take to try to kill off the overgrowth, because that's the first stage anyway. And then what we do is get a little bit more specific of which strains are left behind, So we can do that definite protocol for an overgrowth, which will cover dysbiosis, SIBO, IBS, and a lot of those sort of things, and be the first phase of a more specific treatment towards an estrobolome, testosterone, gut health for brain function and all that stuff.
Epic. And
yeah.
we did get a couple of questions about detoxification. I know that's a whole nother subject. I don't know if, I reckon we'll leave that for another, just that it can be a full episode, because the normal or the best known way of detoxing isn't really detoxing that much.
No. Well, it's very different, very specific. And now we know so much more about gut function and gut health. It changes absolutely everything. Because I mentioned earlier about things like uric acids, oxalates, and all that sort of stuff. I mean, that's half of the healing crisis. And we know that that's all regulated by the microbiome now, where we didn't know that 10 years ago. You've got to realize that. So we did 20 years ago, they did the genome project for the human genome. Then they realized we got similar genetic material to a bloody carrot. And then 10 years later, they did the genome for our microbiome, and they worked out it's like, I think it's 10 to 15,000 times the genetic material in our gut as there is in our whole body. And that's the influential. So our genetic expression, which includes our detoxification and everything like that, is going to be determined by our gut function. So everything that we thought we knew, a lot of it's changed, but then a lot of it's also confirmed to what we used to do in the olden days before we knew too much, trial and error stuff.
We've got one more question before we wrap this up. How much is too much red meat, if you've got time for one more question? So we'll wrap it up after this question.
Oh, that's a tough question, because again,
I'm
unfortunately,
say it depends.
It depends on what lives in your gut. Because if you've got an overgrowth of Clostridia species, and in particular one that's an emergentia, they'll actually take all of the carnitine out of that meat and convert it into TMAO with atherosclerotic plaques. Where if you had none of that strain and you ate all that meat, you would get none of those atherosclerotic plaques through that function. And this is the big difference between what makes one man's medicine and another man's poison, is what's actually living in your guts. And that's why they always have these cardiovascular policies where they'll say, oh, you're only allowed to have this many eggs per day, or this nuts are bad for your heart, or cut out red meat is bad for your heart. But then they go and do another study and they go, actually, it's really good, it's fine. And they don't know, because it just depends on the people in the study and what's living in their guts.
Well, there's always been a period in time where one of the macros is the devil. It just keeps cycling through. But that all comes back to, it just depends on the person and where they're at. But
and what's living in their guts. And that person can change when we change their guts. That's the craziest thing, man.
Wow.
All right. Let's wrap it up, or I'll keep waffling.
The Golden Nugget Guide will be coming soon. I'll put that together early next week, and then we'll drop that into the Facebook group. If you guys are watching somewhere that's not on the Facebook group, it's wherever it's popping up on the screen now. And we're just getting started with this. I'm really excited for everything else to come.
No, I think we just named our first gut health product, Golden Nuggets.
Golden Nugget.
You imagine that, Golden Nuggets. He's better than Super Brown.
Yeah. Well, that was the first one, guys, for the gut health stuff, was Super Brown. So this Golden Nugget one sounds pretty good. Let us know what you think. All right. Cheers, Matt. We'll wrap this up, eh?
All right.
See you guys.